Hello, we are live again. Ask me anything, ask us anything, even though the other one is hidden behind the scenes, not appearing, but it's me and Darin. We have no guests today, and no subject. So any question about anything, and I reserve the right to say I have no bloody idea. Anyways, start preparing your questions, post your questions. I'll do my best to answer them. And until we get there, yes, big announcement or big news or whatever you want to call it. We were nominated, me and Darin, for we're finalists in 3 categories in DevOps dozen. One is the best DevOps related video series, DevOps Toolkit. Another one is DevOps Paradox, the best podcast. And I am nominated as something evangelist. There we go, right? Now, there's the link. It will appear on the screen soon. Go there and cast your vote. I'm not telling you to vote for any of us. Just go and cast your vote for whatever you feel makes sense. And if you vote for any of those 3, that would be awesome, but it's up to you, really. Now, let's go into your questions. And let me give my best to try to answer them. Okay, the 80s Cyborg Ninja. What are your thoughts on a streamlined process for getting CloudFormation templates into AWS Service Catalog? Is there a better way instead of a pipeline with GitLab and Terraform to do this? Unfortunately, I never added anything to AWS Catalog in form of CloudFormation templates. So I don't know. This is a bad start of Ask Me Anything if I say I have no idea. But that's what it is. Sorry for that. And that one also, I'm not doing any AI stuff. So really bad start. I have no idea about AI, artificial intelligence either. I'm still in the phase of trying to find any intelligence anywhere, not only artificial. Okay, so Edson, what can you say about infrastructure as code, repository structure, multi-repos organization tips? So I'm not especially fond of monorepos. I like organizing things personally in different repositories, and those repositories, in my case, tend to be organized around certain area that has the same life cycle, right? So everything related to an application, including infrastructure, I tend to keep in that application repo. Everything that is beyond a single application, like a cluster that will be used by multiple applications, I would keep in a separate repo. So normally I would have infrastructure as code spread across application repositories, like let's say a database for a specific application that would be in an application repository, and let's say one or more higher level repos for clusters or things that are used by multiple applications. Now, whether it's one or more really depends on the scale, in organizational structure, and who is managing what, and so on and so forth. So in many cases, you can think of my organization as very closely resembling the teams, right? So if you have a single team managing all infrastructure outside of those that are specifically related to applications, I would have one repo. If there are multiple teams, multiple repos. Depends also on organizational units. So I'm not giving you a good answer, except that I tend to keep at least 2 types of repositories: applications, including infrastructure as code related to those applications, and infrastructure as code related to multiple applications. Have you used Cilium? If yes, then to solve which problem? I haven't used Cilium to solve any specific problem. Cilium is simply there in quite a few of the clusters that I'm directly or indirectly involved in. It's becoming, or it already is, preferable networking in Kubernetes, but not really for any specific problem. It's simply there. In your opinion, Red Hat's Ansible automation platform, we're thinking about introducing it for us to provide self-services for on-premise environment. So I'm not, if you didn't say on-premise, I would say don't go for Ansible. I don't think it's a good choice in cloud, but for on-premise where you're probably going to manage things in a mutable, not immutable, but mutable way, then Ansible does make a lot of sense. Probably it's a better choice than, as long as it must be mutable, than other competitors like Terraform, Pulumi, Crossplane, what's or not. So it's still a good option for on-prem. Let's put it that way. But keep in mind the latter part of what I said. For things you cannot manage in immutable way. For example, if you're managing VMs and upgrading those VMs at runtime, Ansible is great. If you're managing VMs in a way that you create a new image whenever you want to upgrade something, and then replace VMs with new VMs based on the new image, then it might not be the best choice. Then I would go already towards something like Terraform, Pulumi, assuming that there are providers for what you need. But if it's mutable, changing it at runtime, then Ansible is great. What do you think about HashiStack? Is it easier to learn than Kubernetes? I'm guessing now, so Cold Coffee, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure what you mean by HashiStack. I would guess you mean Nomad and Vault and Console. I would be guessing. Now, if that's what you mean, then to begin with, that's not really specific for not Kubernetes, because you can use Vault with or without Kubernetes. Up to a certain degree, the same thing goes for Console. The real kind of replacement for Kubernetes would be Nomad. Nomad is indeed easier to use for a simple reason. I mean, partly because of the design, right? But in big part because what it does is very, very limited compared to Kubernetes, right? So yes, Kubernetes is harder to learn because what you can do with Kubernetes is infinitely greater than with Nomad. So I'm not sure whether that answers your question. I would say that, let's put it this way, especially if you use managed Kubernetes, if you use Kubernetes for the things that you would do in Nomad, and if you make right choices with Kubernetes, because you must make choices, you cannot just say out of the box Kubernetes, but if you do right choices, then Kubernetes is actually not harder to learn than Nomad. But you're not going to be limited to functionalities that equivalent to Nomad, so it's going to be a bigger learning curve. So yeah, confirmation, yeah, I mean Nomad and Kubernetes. So a different perspective to, I tend to ignore whether it's easier to learn or better. I tend even to ignore today whether Nomad is better or worse than Kubernetes, and focus on investments, right? Nomad, nobody is investing in Nomad from the perspective of software vendors or communities or projects, or hardly anyone, right? It's something that HashiCorp works on, great, it's a great platform, but almost nobody adopted it, right? And Kubernetes, basically almost every software company in the world right now, the vendors, every vendor in the world right now is heavily investing in Kubernetes. And that means that using Nomad, you're missing out on vast majority of innovation, right? It's enough to look at the CNCF ecosystem and ask yourself how many of those things work in Nomad. And you will get a number that is close to zero. So if you ask me that question like 5 years ago, I would have, hey, Nomad is better for this, and Kubernetes is better for that, and maybe Docker Swarm as well. But today, they're all on life support, if not dead. The only thing that survived is Kubernetes, and I would say that unless you're already using Nomad in production, if you're using it in production, keep using it, that's fine. But if you're investing your time to learn something, do not invest in learning Nomad, because it's a wasted investment in a way, right? It's not going anywhere. What's your opinion on Kubernetes operators? Kubernetes operators are or in some form or another, I'm going to even generalize it and say, extending Kubernetes through custom resource definitions and controllers, which essentially is what operators are the critical part of Kubernetes. Doesn't matter whether you extend it by installing third-party applications like Argo CD, for example, or MongoDB, or whatever, almost anything you install will give you operators in some form or another, or to be more precise, controllers and custom resource definitions. And that's critical. Without that, there is no Kubernetes, really. And the question comes only, to me, the question is, should you create your own operators or no? And the answer is yes, a huge yes. The more time passes, the more I'm focused, actually, and convinced that creating your own operators is the key. And it's a key towards fine-tuning. You know, you get Kubernetes cluster, you install third parties that will get you, I don't know, 50% or 99% to where you want to be. And then you need to customize it for your own needs. And that's where operators come in. A great example of creating some form of operators, again, extending Kubernetes, would be to create internal developer platform, enabling everybody else in your company to easily consume certain resources, be it applications, databases, infrastructure, what's or not. So yes, very fond, huge fan of extending Kubernetes, including operators. When would you move from ECS to Kube? Yesterday. ECS at the time, so when ECS started, that was, from my perspective, and I might be wrong, that was AWS response to schedulers, right? To Mesos and Docker Swarm and Kubernetes and Nomad. AWS said, we're going to build something like that ourselves that is going to be specific to AWS. And that's great, right? AWS does that a lot. Almost everybody, actually, to a certain extent, bigger or smaller extent, every cloud provider does that. But to me, it's a similar story like Nomad. If you want to, if you need something like that, if you need a scheduler, if you need a cluster, go for Kube. If you're in AWS, go for EKS with or without Fargate. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying move away from ECS today. That depends what you're running, how dependent you are on it, and so on and so forth. But if I would be starting today, I would not go for ECS under any circumstance. I would go directly for EKS. I cannot answer when you should move. I would suggest yesterday, but depends what you're running right now and how hard it is to move and how locked you are in ECS. There is a dispute on a topic, sounds like decoupling project and pipeline-specific logic blocks on a CI/CD pipeline. What is your opinion on that and examples of failures? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, Dmitry. So I'm going to make a guess and you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing that you mean splitting pipelines into smaller pieces that are, so instead of having one huge pipeline that defines everything from beginning to the end, I'm more and more inclined into having smaller, more reusable pipelines that are reacting to events. Like, hey, when I check out the code, that's an event. Sorry, when I push something to Git repository, that's an event that I'm inventing a use case. I should build and push an image to registry. Now, traditionally, the pipeline would continue doing stuff, but I am more and more inclined towards splitting them and saying, okay, that's where my pipeline ends, and then some other pipeline will be triggered as a result of the event of pushing something to registry, and then maybe that something would, let's say, deploy something somewhere, or change GitOps repository, and that's where it would end, and then a third one would kick in as a result of reaction to a third event, and so on and so forth, right? We can do that with existing tools. It's more like a different way of thinking. So think of it as equivalent of monoliths versus microservices type of approach. Um, and what I like about splitting into smaller ones is because there is greater reusability, and it tends to be more tolerant to failures and so on and so forth. I'm not sure whether I understood your question. If I didn't, let me know. Do you use node ports a lot? I do not use node ports almost ever. There must be some strange requirement. Whenever I can, I would use cluster API. Sorry, not cluster IP. And the only service that would go through a node port would be Ingress or maybe some gateway or something like that. That would be focused. That would be the only entry point to my cluster. Sometimes you might want to use node ports, but there needs to be a good reason for that. Now, what's your favorite CI tools? Depends really. I like simplicity of SaaS. Then I could use GitHub. What's the name? GitHub Actions. When I want to manage my own pipelines and I want something that is 100% working, I might go for Jenkins, because Jenkins has been around for a long time and it's really doing everything it should do. If I want something new and funky and still self-managed, maybe Tekton or Argo Workflows. Depends. The simpler, the better. Oh, there's more. And do you think it should be the programmer's job to make sure their CI process is right for them? Yes, I think so. Let me change the subject from CI and go a bit higher. I would say that it's programmer's job to make sure that anything related to their application is right for them, right? How you build application, how you deploy, how you run builds and tests, how you monitor, and so on and so forth. So I do think that that should be in the hands of people. I'm not going to say even application developers, let's say, the team in charge of an application. Now, for that to work, we need platform teams, also platform engineering that will create tools that will simplify those choices, but not force people to use those choices. So at the same time, I believe in self-sufficient teams, fully in charge of an application from beginning to the end. And that means making your own choices, whatever those choices are. And I believe in the rest of the company, those not involved in end user applications directly, internal teams creating platforms or contributing to the internal platform that can help developers make those choices, but not, and I repeat this, not force them to have those choices. And the last thing is, or should the DevOps team take care of that? I think that I'm probably the only one who sees DevOps differently than others. To me, DevOps is about those self-sufficient teams, right? To me, what many people describe as DevOps would be system operators or sysadmins or SREs, people in charge of infrastructure production on a different level. I see DevOps as combining application development and operational knowledge into a single team. And then what many people might call DevOps, I would probably call platform teams. To me, that's a better description. And anyways, should other teams help care of that? Then the huge answer is yes, but not kind of, I do it for you, but here are the services that you can consume, or a platform. Choose to use it or not, it's your choice, because if I take away the choice from you, then I cannot hold you accountable for that something. I hope that answers your question. If not, let me know, and I'll go deeper. What's your preferred out-of-the-box Kubernetes solution for on-prem? Rancher, Tanzu, OpenShift, if you didn't have the resources to build and maintain a platform yourself. I think you wanted to make a video on that. Yes, so let me start by saying that I spend much less time with on-prem than cloud. So I might not be the best person to answer that question. In the past, I was mostly on-prem, and then as the time passes, I'm moving more and more towards cloud. Again, not the best person to answer that. If I would make that choice, now let's say that those three are choices: Rancher, Tanzu, OpenShift. I would probably be. It's hard to say. Rancher or Tanzu would be my first choice because they're closer to, if not completely, they're vanilla Kubernetes with stuff on top. OpenShift is more like a fork of Kubernetes, which is the part I don't necessarily like, even though what OpenShift does is absolutely amazing. Also, Rancher and Tanzu are more involved in open source. Now, Red Hat is extremely involved in open source, but more from the perspective of contributions rather than their platform being closer to open source. I don't know many people, if anybody, using whatever is the open source version of OpenShift. So I would probably go with, let's say, Rancher if I don't need a single provider to give me everything. If you want a single provider to give you the whole picture for good or bad, then probably Tanzu. And if you want to go directly for a paid solution instead of starting with free and then start paying later, then maybe OpenShift. That's Andreas. Andreas, other tools for resilience testing to simulate network conditions other than Toxic Proxy. I mean, the key ingredient for me for networking, resilience testing of networking, and if you're talking about Kubernetes, that's some sort of service mesh. Because once you start using service mesh, controlling and simulating failures or actually creating artificial failures becomes so much easier. So I would first choose some service mesh. And then on top of that service mesh, probably any of the chaos engineering tools, maybe Litmus, maybe something like that. Andy, what options are there for blue-green deployments without Kubernetes, preferably a GitHub style approach? So let me answer the second question first. There is no GitHub style approach. It does not exist. And I'm ready to fight anybody on that issue outside Kubernetes. There are four. Let me see, just a second. Here's a link to Open GitHubs. And in that link you will see that GitHubs principles and says for something to be called GitHubs, it needs to be declarative. It needs to be versioned and immutable. That's easy. Declarative is easy. Versioned in Git means it's versioned and immutable, and then comes the complicated part. Pulled automatically and continuously reconciled. Only three tools I know of are pulling instead of pushing something and automatically reconciling all the time. And that's Argo CD, Flux, Rancher Fleet. There might be more, but those are the only three I know of. And all three are Kubernetes based. So you cannot really do GitHub style approach without Kubernetes unless I'm mistaken and somebody comes and shows me the tool that does it based on those four principles. Sorry, it's called really GitHubs. Now you probably the best you can get is some kind of pipelines. Whenever you push something to Git, you execute a pipeline that will do blue-green deployments, which are much easier than other variations of progressive delivery. So essentially, you would have Jenkins, GitHub Actions, whichever pipelines you want that would be deployed. If it's not Kubernetes, deploy your stuff to separate VMs and then reconfigure your load balancer or your proxy to send portion or all the requests, or to decide where to go to the new VMs or the old VMs. It's not that hard, to be honest, if it's blue-green, right? If it's other flavors of progressive delivery where you need to include metrics and progressively move, like 10%, 20%, that becomes more complicated. But blue-green, essentially what you really need to deploy it separately and then reconfigure your load balancer to point to new nodes. Do you see GitHub Actions becoming the leading CI/CD tool in the future? In my humble opinion, the marketplace and being the same UI as code development makes it hard to compete with. If it's, I'm not sure, to be honest. Definitely, the integration with GitHub makes it very hard for others to compete with. Similar situation like, what's the name? GitHub, not Copilot. Sorry, Codespaces competing with Gitpod. Being part of GitHub makes it harder for others to compete. That's true. On the other hand, I do not see any CI/CD tool becoming undisputable leader, simply because there are many of them. It's maybe almost a commodity. I don't think that any is going to become a leader. There will be no tool in that area that kind of dominates the market with 50% or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen. I like simplicity of GitHub Actions. It's not the most efficient, it's not the most performant, and it's not the, and what you can do is not more, it's less than other tools, but simplicity behind it is great. So what's next? Oh yeah, remember to vote. Best DevOps related video series, and the best podcast, and the best, oh, this is best me. In the DevOps dozen, there will be a link probably somewhere at the bottom. So remember to vote. Please do it. It would mean a lot. Oh, let me also do the typical dance. Here we go. You need to like this video. You need to subscribe to the channel. You need to join the channel if you can afford it. It's the price of a coffee. And you need to convince your boss or whomever decision maker in your company to sponsor the channel, so I can keep it free. Right? I'm dedicated of. I just need to pay expenses, so and keep it free at the same time. So that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, what's next? Thoughts on OpenFaaS. Is it an alternative to Knative functions? It is an alternative, but I cannot say much more. I haven't used OpenFaaS in a year, maybe 2, so I don't know where it is now. So what I'm going to say might be wrong, likely is, but Knative is some kind of, Knative in general is some kind of a standard with a lot of investment from many individual contributions in companies. And to me, that's just as important as what it does. So it's a very active group of projects. So that's probably much more active than OpenFaaS, which is not that, by the way. It was a great project in the past, and I'm sure it is now. I just haven't used it in a while. I cannot compare them. But blindly, I would say Knative simply because of the investment and the activity that goes into those projects. What is your opinion about observability tools like Grafana Stack, Elastic Observability, Datadog? Can you share your experience about them for medium company but have dedicated team? So I love Grafana Stack plus Prometheus. To me, that's a starting point almost always. If you can go with cloud, with SaaS version of their tools, better. I like SaaS. The less I need to manage, the better. I like that Prometheus in that story is some kind of standard, meaning that whichever tools you adopt, they're most likely going to start with integration with Prometheus and then proceed towards other tools. So you have guaranteed integration with the rest of the CNCF ecosystem. Now this is within Kubernetes sphere. If you're not using Kubernetes, then that's not a good option. Elastic is, to me, I'm not extremely fond of Elastic, mostly because it's a general purpose database. Means that it's a type of data store or a database where you can put metrics and logs and tracing. Don't forget tracing. And that sounds great. Oh, I can put everything in one place, but that makes it much less performant, much more demanding than other tools. I prefer having 3 types of tools specialized. This is designed for metrics. This is like Prometheus. This is designed for logs like Loki. And this was designed for tracing like Jaeger, whatever it's pronounced. Now, if you go for SaaS, Datadog is a great option as long as the price is right for you, because when it's SaaS option, then you don't care that much whether how demanding it is and how hard it is to manage and so on and so forth. But still, you will have more issues with Kubernetes. If you don't use Kubernetes and go for Datadog, no questions asked. And the question is for a medium company but have dedicated team. To me, Grafana Stack is my default choice, and then I might go somewhere else, but that's my default choice. Thoughts on SPI, FFE, Spire, Sigstore, Cosine, Recurrent Software Supply Chain Security Tooling? Cosine and Sigstore, it's a no-brainer. I see no good reason why anybody would not sign everything that they do, from Git commits to container images to artifacts, everything. It's a no-brainer. It's easy. It's free. I mean, you can have paid options, but fast to set up, not much additional time required. So to me, that's a no-brainer. Software supply chain security tooling, I will answer that some later time because that's one of the topics I'm diving deeper in right now. So I don't have crystallized thoughts about it just yet. I need more time. Any thoughts on OpenTelemetry? It's a standard. I love standards. Yeah, all the tools should. So there are 2 parts, right? Should you use the tools that support OpenTelemetry? And that's a clear yes. If you are into tools that do not support it, I would go somewhere else. But that's the less important part, because as long as the tool is doing what it's doing and it does not require you to work how to provide metrics and data and what's or not, I don't care that much. The part that is really important is when you start instrumenting your own applications, right? When you add pieces of code to your application to provide telemetry in one form or another, when you start instrumenting your apps, do it only and exclusively with OpenTelemetry, because that's the promise, right? Instead of instrumenting your code with something that is specific to some vendor, that's never a good idea. Instrument it using OpenTelemetry. So huge yes for your own instrumentation. As more shifts left, do you feel it is better to move to a backend SWE role as in platform DevOps SRE? I feel like I just glue things together with Terraform. I mean, I cannot say whether it's better or worse. We need people who are experts in certain things, especially when you move beyond, let's say, 50 people company. You cannot say everybody knows everything. That's impossible. So yes, we need experts in Terraform, experts in AWS, experts in Kubernetes, experts in Node.js, in Go, in this or that, right? So we need all of those things. The question is more, whether how do we interact with others, right? Do you do stuff for others? If you do, then that's bad. If you provide services so that you can enable others to do things themselves, then that's the right approach, whatever the name is, right? I'm a huge believer in providing services for everybody else in your company, whatever you want to call it. DevOps, platform engineering, SRE, I don't care. If that's your focus, then huge yes. Do you think it's possible to hire an apprentice and teach them to do your work? Yes, of course. I mean, everybody started somewhere, right? Nobody was that I know of was born with 20 years of experience in this industry, right? So we were all apprentices at one moment, and it's very important that we keep building generations of people who are successful and know what they're doing. So, yes, you need to teach people how to do. I'm not sure whether to do your work, but how to be successful, right? Take fresh blood, recently graduated people, and teach them how to become professionals. Huge yes. Secret management in Rancher, RKE, sealed secrets or vault. I love sealed secrets. I absolutely love it. I know that some people freak out how that's less secure than vault and all that stuff. If you need vault, then use it. HashiCorp Vault is some kind of a golden standard. So it's similar to one of the previous questions. By default, I would go with sealed secrets. And then I would switch to Vault when somebody shows me and tells me that something needs to be done that is not done through sealed secrets. Let's put it that way. Next event conference you're going to. I'm going to Athens next week, and then I'm finished for the year. There is OpenConf or something like that. It's strategically chosen. I'm trying to avoid going anywhere north from where I'm right now, Barcelona, until the winter is finished. So OpenConf, and I think that actually, that's a great question from Kunal. I think that nothing until the end of the year, and the next conference, the first conference I have, I think, in next year is Kunal's conference. Sivo Navigate. Sivo Navigate, yeah, that's the first next year for me. When should one start using Istio over simple ingress? First of all, when you are confident in managing your cluster without Istio or any other service mesh. I've seen very bad results when people want to start with Kubernetes with everything. That's a very, very bad idea. But Istio and other service meshes give you certain things that Ingress doesn't, like mutual TLS, weighted traffic, right? I was talking about blue-green deployment earlier, right? Istio enables blue-green deployment. It enables Canary deployment. It enables quite a few other things, which are possible without it, just to clarify, but are so much easier with Istio, right? And now the question is whether you need it. If all you need is for a request to enter your load balancer forwards it to a cluster, and cluster finds the right service to go to, and that's Ingress. If that's what you need, and HTTPS is enough for you, no mutual TLS, no blue-green deployments, no canaries, etc., etc., etc. If you don't need anything else, then keep Ingress. The simpler, the better. The moment you need more, you will need Istio or something similar. I'm not answering your question, Onkar, but it's hard to answer it, say, tomorrow if I don't know exactly what you're doing. Shiam, I'm not sorry if I'm butchering your names. Well, DevOps has so many tools for each step in the process, but can you tell standard tools for beginners? Again, depends what you're doing, right? Because it could be pipelines, what we used to call CI. It could be GitOps. If it's pipelines, there are too many for me to pick from. If it's GitOps, Argo CD, or maybe Flux are my choices. If it's a platform to run your stuff on, that's without doubt Kubernetes. If it's policies, I would choose Kyverno probably. I'm not sure what else. You need to be more specific. If you can ask me kind of like, what would you choose for this area? Because DevOps can be anything, right? Security, deployments, management, observability. It can be literally anything. That's why I don't like the term that much anymore. But if you ask me more specifically, what would you choose for this? I'll do my best to answer. Andy, GitOps, if, for example, we have a CloudFormation stack that fires events on any drift and self-remediates, isn't that GitOps? No, it's not officially GitOps. The effect might be very similar, but it's not GitOps, because one of those 4 rules is that it pools, right? So the moment you set fire, you're talking about push-based mechanism. There are advantages, but also disadvantages to push-based mechanism. One of the 4 rules is that GitOps pools information, right? So if you would set up some kind of a cron job that would go to your repository periodically, fetch Git, that would be pooling, and it would, if it would be checking periodically, let's say every minute or 3 minutes, the drift between what is in Git and what is really, then you would fulfill the 4th requirements, automatically reconciled. But it's not on events. First, it's not firing, because that's pushing. Second, it's not on events, because event could be, let's say, I push something to Git, right? And that's an event. And then I check and go and see, is this the same as that? No, let me reconcile the drift. But then until the next time event happens, there is no reconciliation happening, right? If the node goes down, if something happens to your actual state, that will not be corrected until the next time the event is generated, right? That's why that it's simply not constant or continuous reconciliation, right? But similar effect, let's say, just not calling it GitOps. Yes, you can accomplish either by reacting to events, like pushing something to Git, or even better, closer to GitOps, if you do some kind of a cron job, right? Some process that executes every few minutes. Then you would have that. What's your thoughts about Gateway API? A huge fan of it, right? Gateway API is almost certainly going to replace Ingress. Nobody really disputes that. I think that it will replace parts of service meshes as well. Not necessarily fully. We'll see. That's already further away in the future. But I'm a huge fan of Gateway API. Ingress was flawed from the start. It was never really what we needed. It's too simple. Ingress needs to go away. I mean, it's good for very simple use cases, but anything beyond simple, the fact that you need service mesh today shows that Ingress itself is not enough. Gateway API is somewhere between Ingress and service mesh today. We'll see where it goes in the future, but I'm following it closely, very, very fond of it. How to go into open source with DevOps? Can you make a roadmap? Cannot make a roadmap into how you assume. Actually, I'm not sure whether you're referring to how you use open source or how you contribute. I'm going to guess that you're asking how to contribute. And I cannot give the roadmap. What I can give is opinion that you should pick something you're really interested in, something you use, and contribute to that. Do not pick a random project, like, oh, let's pick a random project to contribute. Don't do that. Find a tool or a project that you are using yourself. Everybody has at least one. And that's the one you want to contribute because you're already familiar with it, you're vested in it, you already know it up to a certain extent. So pick a tool that, create a list of 5 tools you use the most. And one of those is your candidate to contribute. Are there, Joao, are there some open source tools to help right size the pod's resources, limits, and requests? Not that I know. Not that I know. I mean, at least not that I know in a way that it does it automatically. We have vertical pod autoscaler, which will right size your pod. So actually the answer is wrong. Yes, there is. It's vertical pod autoscaler. That right sizes your pod resources. The problem with vertical pod autoscaler is that it is really conflicting with horizontal pod autoscaler, means that you will have hard time using it together with horizontal scaling. That's an issue. So I don't use it much because scaling horizontally more often than not is more important. If you cannot scale horizontally, then vertical pod autoscaler is going to right size it for you, right? I don't have a better solution, a better answer than look at the data in your wherever you keep metrics, Prometheus, and what's or not, over a period of time, and adjust yourself. No better suggestion right now. Heather, what are your thoughts on the big tech industry layoffs and hiring freeze state right now? I think it's temporary. There it goes up and down, and everyone sometimes partly it's real, but in part because crisis is upon us, right? Or I don't know whether we're entering crisis or exiting. But I don't think that that's full story. I think that many of the big layoffs are not related to crisis, but are related to some very, very, very bad decisions. The biggest layoffs right now that I know of is Facebook and Twitter. And both of them have nothing to do with the state of the industry, have nothing to do with crisis, have to do with some really bad decisions made by respective decision makers in those companies. Nevertheless, even if I ignore those, yes, there are some layoffs and things like that, but I think it's very temporary. I think that we are going to bounce back relatively fast. 2023 for sure. Satyajit, are companies hiring DevOps entry-level jobs remote? Look, I have a very, very specific opinion about DevOps. I think that DevOps are people who know how to write code, who are coders, developers, and who have experience in ops. And if that perspective is correct, if it's not only people who know something about ops or something about development, but both, then it's very hard to have entry-level job, right? Because DevOps might not be the best choice from my perspective and the way how I define it. It's not something you start with. You start as a developer or you start as an ops person, because starting with both sounds a bit too much for a newbie. And if I'm right in that, then there are no entry-level jobs. Now, I know that in reality, many companies are asking for entry-level jobs, but I think that they're mistaken about what DevOps is. Do you think Wasm will take over the average container? I don't know yet. I don't know. I'm curious myself. Still early to say. I also did not dig deep enough yet. We'll see. I'm too afraid to give any prediction right now. It's certainly interesting. Devendra, which is the most demand certificate currently in terms of cloud, DevOps, SRE, Kubernetes? Look, cloud and Kubernetes are the requirements in many companies for DevOps and SRE, right? So I would say that option 1 and 4 are almost prerequisites for 2 and 3. So if I would personally, I would never ignoring companies that are on-prem. I'm going to ignore them for a second, even though I shouldn't. I would not hire somebody that has certificate in 2 or 3 DevOps or SRE without really mastering cloud and or Kubernetes first. So 1 and 4 would be my answer. Do you have course that has been published in any platform? Would love to know. I had courses before in Udemy and a couple of other places, but the stuff and the material I tend to explore in general, including courses, is very close to the edge. Edge not as in edge computing, but edge being very new. And the newer something is, the faster it grows old, the faster it becomes changes. So I had a lot of trouble with my courses in the past, and I removed them because after a year, I look at them and say, this is not right. So I removed all my courses and books, or most of them. Vahid, a lot of questions today. This is awesome. What quality measures one must have for production grade GitOps repos? Static code analysis, linters. Yes, to all of those. Especially, you need all of those. You definitely want to add security scanning over there. And you want to definitely add rules to what can be used. And you definitely want to add policies over there. So if I would have to choose one of the 3, that would be policies more than anything else. So static code analysis, yes. Linters, yes. Policies, I would choose Caverno if you're using Kubernetes. If you're not using Kubernetes, then OPA. And you need some security scanning. If you're we covered in the Friday stream that now Harbor supports not only container images, but other stuff like binaries and Helm charts and so on and so forth. And that's awesome for a few reasons, but one of those reasons is that now you can enforce that things, and not only containers images, are signed and validated that they're free from security threats at certain level over there. And the advantage of doing it there is that instead of you making, oh, did I run this? Did I do this? I can tell Harbor, for example, and other tools as well, hey, you run the checks of this kind of that without anybody executing them specifically. And if somebody doesn't do something, that's okay, because instead of preventing people to proceed further, I'm going to prevent people from using this image or this binary if it doesn't fulfill certain requirements. So yes, to those 2 and policies, and what did I say else? Security scanning, of course. Code Coffee, are you making DevOps Toolkit boot series again? The DevOps 3.0 Toolkit? No, unfortunately, no. No, unfortunately, I don't know whether it's unfortunately or fortunately. The thing is that it takes a year to create a course or a book, becomes obsolete fast, and I feel that doing it in YouTube weekly instead of, over a year makes more sense. So right now I'm more inclined towards weekly content than something like a book. Do you have a YouTube video or conference talk you frequently recommend to people who could be non-technical? If you search in my channel, here in this channel, IDP is one of the... So there is a talk, what is Kubernetes? I like that talk a lot. That's in my channel in a video, not a talk. I did a talk about that as well, because it gives a different perspective on Kubernetes. And the second I would recommend was the one, search for IDP, Internal Developer Platform. That's one of the videos I like a lot among those that I published, at least not so long ago. What's in a chest? I don't know. My girlfriend has something in a chest. I don't know what it is. Some... As a cable. there's some hard disk over here. I think it's kind of stuff that should go to trash. Because, nobody opened this chest in so long that whatever is there cannot have any value. What do you think of a company that asks for DevOps but have no infrastructure? I'm not sure what that means, no infrastructure. I mean, I'm guessing you mean a company starts from scratch, he did not yet set up servers or anything. No, you need to have ops people. So again, going back to my definition, DevOps is about self-sufficient teams that, are in charge of an application from beginning to the end, from idea until it's running in production. It's about putting operational knowledge up to a certain level to application developer teams of application developers and others. With that definition, yes, you need either an ops person or more that will. So let's say that you have 3 sizes of companies. Small, use SaaS for everything. Just kind of like if you're too small, 20 people, you have no that type of experience, use SaaS for everything. Fly.io or something like that. Kind of like, here's a container, run my application. Don't ask me anything, right? When you grow a bit bigger, mid-size, which is a loose term, then you want to start bringing in ops or SREs or what many companies call DevOps that will be managing your services and your infrastructure. And when you grow a bit more, then you want to think about platform teams. That's the ultimate goal, I think. Devendra, okay, we are almost finished. Time flies. My question was, what is the most in-demand certification? I don't know. I do not know because I haven't been certified in anything for 10 years, so I really don't know. Haven't done certification myself for a very, very long time. Do you have something to say about Spotify's Backstage? Yes, I have 2 things to say about Spotify's Backstage. First of all, it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. I really don't like it. And I think that Spotify's Backstage reflects problems of many other open source projects that did not start as open source project, but for something that was used internally and then open sourced later, and then we have a lot of problem with it on usability level, and it takes a lot of time, very often never, until that project gets away from being designed for specific needs of a specific company and being adopted and usable to everybody. So I don't like it, but, and here comes the second answer to that question, we do not have anything better today. So independently of my issues with Backstage and dislike with it, that's the best option we have today. And from that perspective, Backstage is a critical component especially in platform building. So yes, use it. I hope we're gonna get something better, but until we do, huge yes to Backstage, even though I dislike it. Do you have any good practice for creating CI/CD pipeline for Argo CD? You said to edit manifests for image tag or different approach. Yes, SED, I see nothing wrong with SED. I think SED is great. Now, something better, yes, YQ. YQ or JQ, depending on whether you use YAML or JSON, is better than SED. Now, if you want something more, it depends on what you use on the other side. If you use Argo CD, you might want to check out Argo CD image updater. I'm not especially fond of it, but there it is. If you use customize, then there is a command, customize edit image, which will do equivalent of SED or YQ. If you use Helm, that's easy, kind of like you have a single entry in values YAML. You can change it any way you like. SED works, but nothing wrong with SED. I like SED. Oh yeah, we're almost finished. 1 minute. Again, the last time, or probably not last time in this session, not the last time ever. Vote in DevOps dozen or whatever is the name. Vote for their different categories. One of them is best DevOps related video series. DevOps Toolkit is there. This channel. The other one is DevOps related podcast series. That's DevOps Paradox. And by the way, if you're not following DevOps Paradox podcast, you should. DevOpsParadox.com. Easy to remember. That's a completely different thing, but me and Darin, the guy behind the scenes here, are doing it together. Absolutely awesome. And I happen to be nominated thanks to viewers of this channel who voted in the first round. Now I'm a finalist for the top something DevOps evangelist. Check it out, vote. There's the address. Here's the address. How do I point? Here is the address. Go there and vote. And we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for also questions. I'm sorry that I couldn't answer all of them. I tried to speak fast so that I catch up with all of you. I didn't. If I missed your question, that might be because I missed it or there was no time, no hard feelings. And hope to see you next time. The idea is to have this every Thursday, but sometimes me or Darin cannot do it and then we skip it, usually because we're traveling. And today was exception. It's not Thursday today, it's Wednesday because I was told that there is a holiday, Thanksgiving probably or something like that in US, that nobody is going to do anything. Everybody is on holiday. So today we moved it to Wednesday. Great audience. Thank you so much for watching. Keep up with great questions. See you next time. Cheers.